Matthews. Look at this. Holy shit.
Garnishments, bank levies, and private collectors. No matter how much.
And compounded GLP-1 injections, the same active ingredient that's in Ozempic and Wegovy. Through hers, pricing for oral medication kits starts at just $69 a month for a 10.
What is on fire over here in Louisville? And it stinks out here too. What is that?
Now, you know how eerie it is to look at a plane on flight radar only to see its recent flight status to be unknown, especially after seeing this plane in a video like this. Yes, everybody, of course, we're going to talk about the UPS MD-11 crash in Louisville that happened just last night in the US. In the few videos we've seen, we see this plane with its left wing practically on fire, not able to create enough speed and therefore lift to keep itself in the air, practically overrunning. In this dashcam footage, we can see the airplane banking to its dead wing, crashing right into a UPS warehouse facility, leaving a huge trail of burning fuel along its way. Also, because of the crash location being an industrial site, there's more and more CCTV camera footage being uploaded as we speak. Oh my goodness. We can see an airplane that's barely gone airborne, around 170 feet or so.
Something ain't making sense with this, because this plane from the footage is on fire before it even leaves the ground. Why didn't they abort the flight pattern and shut her down? You can see it as it's coming down the. How come flight control didn't say, "Hey, you're on fire, shut it down, abort takeoff"? Something ain't right here. Good morning, anybody in chat. Let's keep playing this.
Something else we saw is lots of debris on the runway it departed out of. In fact, the plane seemed to have lost its whole engine along the takeoff run.
Howdy everyone, I'm Keith Edwards and I'm a technical sales consultant here at Helio. I'm really excited to tell you about our new zero money down, no payments for 6-month financing offer for Helio Ag drones. With demands for our systems at an all-time high, now is the time to secure your fleet for the upcoming spray season.
These drones right here.
For a limited time, Helio and our financing partners are offering a manufacturer buy-down coupled with delayed payment financing options, meaning you won't have to make any payments for your purchase until spring of 2026. Use this offer to lock in your equipment and set yourself up for success. This deal only lasts to the end of the year, so act now.
And start making them with weapons. All right, let's get through this here and see what's going on.
So let's jump back in time in the flight simulator. Here we are on board November 259er UP, which is the very plane involved in the crash. It's around about 4, this airplane is parked at the UPS ramp The Louisville Muhammad Ali Airport is a big hub for UPS, and they have this whole southern ramp to themselves. All of them are UPS ramps, and the airplane is parked right here. It's being loaded at ramp 5 at around 3 to 4 p.m., getting ready for its flight to Honolulu. This MD-11 tri-jet is 31 years old, first flew in 1991, and of course a flight from Louisville, Kentucky to Honolulu in Hawaii is quite long, 8 hours and 38 minutes on average. This plane though hasn't done a long flight like this in a while. It had a maintenance break from September the 3rd to the 18th of October, and it's only done 1 to 4 hour flights ever since. In fact, the last flight to be this long for this plane was on the 3rd of May. Now, a long flight always means one thing: a heavy airplane. Tens of thousands of gallons of fuel being loaded into this plane indeed, which does explain the enormous trail of jet fuel it left along its crash path. In fact, 38,000 gallons of fuel, nearly 250-ish thousand pounds, which is nearly the maximum fuel load this plane can take. Anyway, it is 5:02 local time. The airplane has just pushed back and turned on its engines. 3 of them. Now this will be important for future reference. This right here is engine number 1. This right here is engine number 2, the upper engine, and this right here is engine number 3. The airplane now, with a lot of load and a lot of fuel, begins taxiing to its departure runway, which is right next to here. From holding point Bravo of the runway 17 right at 5:10 local time, the UPS flight 2976 rolls onto the runway for its departure. Now this is obviously where the story gets rough, and where we also don't really know what caused the left engine to separate. But, well, the plane obviously took off from the long 3,600 meter long runway. Because of our immense weight, we have a very, very late decision speed, 150 knots or so, at least here in the flight sim. Now, if you don't know, the decision speed V1 means that after we reach that speed, we cannot reject the takeoff safely because we don't have enough runway left. What would have happened now is that at a lot of airspeed, the engine number 1 catches fire for whatever reason, and that leads to an uncontained engine failure. And what an uncontained engine failure looks like is this: the engine breaks apart from the airplane. Now, about this fire, it's very plausible as well that the engine broke off first, and then the leaking fuel caused the wing to ignite as well. So when the airplane exactly caught fire is unknown yet.
All right, let's recap on this. This guy is saying when you have a turbine go out, that the engine falls off. That's a lie. Usually when an engine burns out a turbine, it don't fall off the wing. It don't fall off the wing. It burns out. Whether it be a turbine thin, maybe it hit a bird, maybe just something happened in it and it burnt out, it blew up or whatever they call it, it don't fall off of the wing. This thing fell off before it even took off. And someone had to see it from the control tower because it was on fire as it was rolling down the runway. Now, this guy's saying, well, their airspeed and everything, they could have stopped that plane right there. Air traffic control, hey, you just dropped the motor, abort landing, and they could have shut it down. And that's why the runways are longer at the end in case they have to abort and they just go into a pile of grass or a swamp or whatever it is at the end of the runway. Barriers up and stuff like that. I would have aborted. I would have, traffic control is there. Shut it down. Power down. You lost the wing. You left it on the runway. Now, did anyone even tell them that? Now, could this plane fly with that motor gone? I don't know. I don't know. They say a plane could stay up with one motor, but I don't think so. But this had 2, but the motor was positioned on the tail. So, you're not going to be able to steer it too well or have power on the one side when you ain't got a motor. So, yeah, I don't know. So I imagine once it left the ground, yeah, if it had no motor on that side and these guys didn't know how to tether a motor to keep it balanced, uh, which I don't think you could do with that jet. I really don't think you could do that with, some of these planes I've seen, yeah. Some of these guys are pretty good. They can tether it and give power to one side of the motor, to one side of the plane, and keep it up. But not when you lose a whole motor and that was your whole thing on that side. I don't know. This whole thing seems crazy. So they didn't have 250,000 gallons of fuel on there, like some of these people are saying. 250,000 pounds of fuel, which is like 40,000 gallons of fuel. So there actually wasn't 250,000 gallons of fuel in them planes. There was 250,000 pounds on the plane, of fuel in the wings. All right, let's continue here.
But not as cleanly as it just did here in the flight sim model. No, you can see so much debris that we can assume that this engine breaking off could have caused a lot of debris to fly around the airplane as well. And that is bad news. See, normally this plane could be able to somehow still take off and reach proper speeds on two engines. But it becomes an issue when debris hits the upper engine number 2 as well. Yes, it could have been that the engine number 2, by ingesting debris, also had a sort of failure. This is what people believe what happened. We obviously don't know yet. Investigations will have to show. Especially also how the left CF6 engine could have separated so easily after such a short time. It could have very well been that the engine number 1 catching fire would have melted the pylons right off. Either way, here we are now. We are at a lot of speed with only one engine working with a very heavy airplane that is unable to create. And just like in real life, we've got a left bank, and this is the warehouse that the airplane crashed into. Loads of people online are, drawing relations to the American Airlines Flight 191 because it has very similar earmarks. American Airlines Flight 191 was DC-10, also a trijet, which had its left engine break off. The engine ended up being found as well next to the runway, just like what we saw here. The American Airlines Flight 191 ended up being 30 seconds in the air. It impacted the ground not far from its departure airport in Chicago, killing almost everyone on board. Now about this Flight 191, the reason that left engine fell off is because the pylon broke because of improper maintenance. They apparently used forklifts to raise the engine in maintenance and damaging the pylons, which is why the engine fell off. This case feels a little bit different though, because of the massive ball of fire we can see on the left engine before it even fell off, which is happening right now here in slow motion. And investigations will have to show why the CF6 engine could have separated even from an engine fire, which normally doesn't happen. An engine on fire shouldn't cause it to separate from the airplane, especially because of the debris damage that can be done to engine number 2. So far we know that the UPS Airlines Flight 2976 had 3 crew members on board, all of which deceased in the incident, of course, which is extremely tragic because of the almost helpless nature of the incident. From what we see so far, no pilot action could have prevented this incident. An uncontained engine failure after the decision speed to be able to stop again, which then leads to another engine failure because of debris. There is really nothing you can do. So my prayers go out to the families and also of the so far 4 more people.
Well, I think they could have shut it down in time, right? I don't know if they were communicating with the tower, but someone had to see that in the tower, what was going on. And even with 2 motors, they would have had enough power to shut down and use brakes and everything. They could have reversed turbines and everything. So I don't know what kind of pilot, what kind of history did the pilot have? How old of a pilot was he? You know, how many years has he been flying? You know, a lot of things play a factor in this. But if you're rolling down the runway and a motor falls off and you got flames coming out, usually you abort the takeoff. Why they even tried to get up in the sky is crazy. Crazy. Bad judgment, bad call. And as you can see at the end of the runway, like I said, at the end of these runways, folks, they usually have a gravel pit or like a dirt pit where it's real soft or whatever, and the plane, the wheels get caught up in it and it slows it down and everything. So I don't know. I think it was just bad judgment to even to not abort.
That deceased on the ground in the warehouse. So everybody, yeah, this is a very developing story. And we've learned that everything I've said could be genuinely wrong because the story is so early in development. What do you think about this incident? Let me know in the comments. I guess I'll keep you updated. And thank you guys for watching this.
The bike dealer you trust trusts these bikes.
If you're looking for a lighter bike that's easy to maneuver, then the Breeze One is for you. It's lightweight enough for you to lift it. It's easy to get on, really natural riding experience. But if you're looking for an all-in-one commuter bike, the Discover 2 is your bike. This bike was built with comfort at the forefront, giving you the perfect riding position due to its adjustability, ergonomics.
All right, 3 dead, 11 taken to the hospital. Those are the preliminary reports after the tragic crash of UPS 2976 today, shortly after takeoff. And I mean, barely after takeoff from Muhammad Ali Airport in Louisville, Kentucky. What are the details that we know so far? Well, we don't know a whole lot. We have 4 videos I want to show you so far, showing you various aspects of what took place. But UPS, who operates their main hub is Louisville, Kentucky, was operating flight 2976 from Louisville to Honolulu, Hawaii. That flight's a little over 8 hours long, about 8 hours and 20 minutes altogether. It's taking, I think, 220,000 pounds of gas, and that's going to be somewhere around 34,000 gallons of gas. And when you look at the video and see the fireball, you can see why that was just such a tragic thing that happened, and so much explosion, so much. The fireball was just absolutely huge. And we'll talk about things that complicated that as well. So what I want to do is kind of take you through the early stages of the flight. The airplane taxis out. They're fully loaded up. They're about at max gross weight as they taxi out. They taxi onto runway 17. They're cleared for takeoff. The airplane then begins its long takeoff roll. And there's a phase in that takeoff roll that is in between what's called V1 and rotate. And that V1 speed is the decision speed. It's the go, no-go speed. In other words, if you lose an engine, you have a massive failure after V1. You can't stop that airplane in the remaining runway that you have. You must go airborne at that point. So I believe that the pilots were past V1, and I know that because the flight radar 24 information tells us that they went off the end of the runway at 184 knots. That's well above any rotate speed for an MD-11. Now, this particular MD-11, 3 engines on the MD-11. It was manufactured in 1991. There's been a number of issues with the MD-11 over the years. When I first got hired at my airline in 1991, the MD-11 was the brand new shiny object on the planet. And so we only had them for a few years, and then we got rid of them because they were just maintenance headaches. They went to many of the cargo haulers like FedEx and UPS. UPS now is flying this airplane over to Honolulu, max gross weight, 34,000 gallons of gas as it goes off the end of the runway. As we watch the takeoff roll, the airplane gets barely airborne. You can see the nose of the airplane lift off. The number 1 engine is clearly on fire. and then it settles back in. Let me show you the video that shows you that very clearly here. All right, and there's a trigger warning. This is not going to be easy to watch. Here they are rolling down the runway. I'm going to stop it right there. You can see that the left wing, right where the left engine is on fire. The nose of the airplane is already lifted off. So the bystander who is filming this video gets it just after that moment on the runway where they hit V1, but they haven't quite gotten to rotate speed just yet. And so somewhere in between that, what kind of a no man's land, I've had that gap be as much as 10 to 15 knots of airspeed. It seems like an eternity. After you hear V1, you expect to hear rotate right away. And if it's 10 or 15 knots before you hear it, man, you're rolling down that runway, burning up runway, knowing you can't stop on the runway ahead of you, and you're going to go airborne, and you're hoping that nothing happens. Now, pilots prepare for this all the time, but what happened here, that's not something you can plan for. So they're rolling down the runway. They've lifted the nose off the ground. The ADS-B data says they went off the end of the runway at 140 knots and basically 150 feet of altitude. They're not that far off the runway. The nose of the aircraft, where the cockpit is, might be that far off the runway, but the wheels and the bottom of the airplane is much, much closer to the runway. Let me pick it up from here, and you're going to watch. It goes out of the frame just for a minute. It comes back in, and there's a fireball. So they're rotating just now. They're trying to lift off, and here we go. They get a little bit of airborne. They go out of the shot. The shot comes back in, and boom. That's right past the blast fence at the end of the runway. They've just barely cleared that by inches. And then, and we'll show you a picture of the top of the first building that they hit. There's this rut down the first top of the building. That could have been the landing gear. It could have been the left wing. And I'll tell you why in a minute. I think it's the left wing. I've got more video to show you. And now they create this huge fireball, and the airplane goes for what seems like almost a mile. I'll show you that at the end, the video of how far this airplane went. How do I know that they weren't rejecting the takeoff when they went to the end of the runway? Because of how fast they were going. Typical rotate speed at this gross weight is going to be somewhere around 135 knots altogether, 140 maybe at the top. They were 45 knots past that. They were past that decision point, and they were taken off already. They just simply couldn't get enough lift to get very far airborne, just enough to clear the fence. The airplane settles back in. I want to show you a flight aware video that we put together, and we're just going to run this real quick. This flight aware video, and let's start it now. That flight aware video just goes for the duration of the flight, which was no time at all. And you can see the line going from left to right. The airplane begins to accelerate just a little bit in speed. It kind of wobbles around a little bit. The information is not very accurate on the ground. And then when it finally gets to the end, it's at 184 knots. And that's all we can really learn from that ADS-B data on Flight Radar 24, is that this got to 184 knots before they plowed off the end of the runway. Let me show you now another video of the Vantage now from a CCTV. All right, it's a closed circuit TV.
All right, so what do we got here? Probably pilot error. He had enough time to shut down, but he didn't. I don't know why they didn't. I don't know why. I wonder if there was any communication with Tower letting them know you lost an engine. Hey, come back here and pick up your turbine that's laying on the runway. You know, human error is what it is. They should have never took off. They had plenty of time to shut down. I would rather have these planes crash at the end of the runway. It might have been a lot less. No matter what, they were doomed. And why do I say that? Is because the engine fell off, but the fuel inside the wing continued to burn. So no matter what, it was going to go up because the fuel was ignited within the wing. When they take off, there ain't no motor. They don't have a motor on that side when they take off. What's burning then? The wing. The wing's leaking fuel out of it, and that's supplying the fire. So they left the turbine on the runway. So, yeah, they had plenty of time to shut down. I don't know why they didn't. And I don't know why Tower Control didn't tell them, you're burning, abort, shut it down. If you have to crash it into the pylons or whatever and on the end of the runway.
That's taking a look at the airplane after it settles back in and it's beginning now to crash. Here we go. Now watch from the right side. Now I'm going to stop it right there. You see the airplane coming in. It's already on the ground and it's already, the fireball is forming behind it. All right, I'm going to pick it up here and you see the airplane right there. I'm going to stop it. It's on a knife edge on the left side of the aircraft as it then plows through a bunch of buildings and parking lots and everything else as it continues the carnage in front of it. Why did this airplane go so far? Because typically something like this, if they were to crash land, the wings would catch, the wheels would catch, this aircraft would dig in and it wouldn't go nearly as far as it went. I think it's because it went over on the left side. And so it's kind of like a knife edge. You can see that right wing with the right engine intact, by the way, up in the air. So this aircraft now is just plowing a knife edge in and it's going to go for quite a long time, but it's got all of that momentum because it was going 184 plus miles per hour knots when it went off and it crashed. So I'll finish this video. Oh, that's hard. It's hard to watch. It's just really difficult to watch. So, what's the big picture on all this? What's the most critical phase of flight? The most critical phase of flight is the takeoff phase. Why is that? Because in the takeoff phase, you're the heaviest you're ever going to be. You got the most fuel on board that you're ever going to have. You're the slowest that you're ever going to go, and you're fully configured. And most importantly, you've got almost all of your power all the way up. So when you're landing, you're much lighter, you have much less fuel, and your power is pulled all the way back. So if you need to go around, you got all that power you can bring on to fly out of whatever situation you find yourself in. Not the same on a takeoff. So these guys are going down the runway. Something happens between V1 and rotate speed, and it's catastrophic. I have never seen an uncontained fire on an engine like this. Now, there's a video I'm going to show you here right now that is a picture of an engine sitting off of the runway. I've been told that it's the #1 engine off of this MD-11. It's not verified. None of the news services have reported that yet. So I don't want to get out over my skis on this because it could have been photoshopped. But if the left engine did fall off of this aircraft, it would explain a lot. You can see the engine is on fire as they're kind of, wobbling and rotating into the air. The engine might have already departed. It tore a bunch of the left side of the wing apart. You got this now uncontrolled fire going on, all of that loss of lift. And why the left knife edge? Because that right engine is still producing full power. So it's forcing the airplane to turn like this, right? And you're going to counter that with right rudder. You're going to try to bring the nose back around. But in a situation like this, where the engine on the left side has completely departed and you got full power on the right side, it's going to be so dramatic. It's going to be very, very difficult to keep that nose from coming all the way around to the left. So it does make sense that left wing or that left main mount gear would dig into that.
This guy is right. This guy is definitely right about that. When you have no motor, he's got to keep his altitude, right? So he's full throttle on the right side of the plane on that motor, right? But he's got nothing. He's got to pull his ailerons around so he can keep the nose going, right? And that's a lot of stress on the controls. Right? Because you don't have no power or nothing. You're trying to bring the plane's nose back where you're flying straight, but you got all the power going on the right side motor. So now you've created pressure on the left side of the plane. And when that happens, what might have happened is the aileron screw, jack screw, whatever they call it, the control wires or mechanical, whatever, broke. And that's when it went completely to the left side, and the wing dropped dramatically and the whole plane tipped. And that could be because they might have been trying to put ailerons and stuff, you know, all kinds of force on the left side. And they had full steam engines on the right side. And it could have been just very stressful for the mechanicals within the left side of the plane. And it broke. And the engine coming off and everything, you know, ripped, what did it do? Ripped the fuel line out of the turbine. And thus far, they're saying, and this guy said, well, this thing left the ground and it was on fire and it wasn't controlled. Well, usually the motors in them planes have fire extinguishers within the turbine motor. So if you got no motor on the plane, you can't control a fire. Therefore, the fire just continues to leak. Now, you might have had a shutoff valve that they might have had inside the cockpit where they could shut the motor off and the fuel pump to that motor within the wing and might have shut it down. But you got all this stuff going at once. And human failure. We're not 100%. We're not perfect. We're humans. And in a stressful situation like that, what was the best thing they could have done? They should have aborted the mission, aborted the flight, shut it down, and crashed on ground. It would have been a lot safer. They knew they were going to go. They knew that as soon as they left the ground with that plane, these pilots knew it was all over with. And all I can say is, thank God it didn't happen to a passenger jetliner. And this was just a UPS jet with only 3 people on it, or 5 people or something like that on it, or whatever. So, you know, this guy's right. You know, he's flabbergasted because he's seen it take off and it was a fireball on that side and not contained. But when you ain't got no fire extinguishers because the motor ripped off, yeah, you can't. You got all this going on. I think the best thing would have been tower control saying abort takeoff. You lost the motor, shut it down. We got emergency vehicles on the way, and let them run off the end of the runway, and we would have had a better situation than this.
Building as it was coming down into it. As it did that, the airplane kept rolling over, and as it rolled over on that knife edge, as you saw in the last video, they just kind of plowed right in, and they just kept going with all of that momentum. There have been reports now I've listened to on several news agencies. Reuters was reporting that they hit a fuel farm or a fuel tank off the end of the runway, and that's why that huge big ball and why the fire continued for as long as it did. I'm here to tell you that 34,000 gallons of gas is about 3 times as much gas as the airplanes that hit the World Trade Center had. I was originally scheduled on that first airplane, and typically a flight from Boston to Los Angeles would, on a 767, you'd take around 85 to 90,000 pounds of gas, maybe 100 on a rare occasion. They've got well over 2.5 times that much fuel on this MD-11. There was a shot from a helicopter, and you can see the...
All right, so this guy's saying they had a bunch of fuel. They were loaded down. But were they carrying any cargo is my question. You add on 250,000 pounds onto whatever cargo they were carrying. Were they loaded down also with cargo? Or were they completely empty, and the only thing on that plane was the fuel in the wings, the 40,000 gallons, which equals 250,000 pounds of weight. You know, you have to take that in consideration too. Well, we got 50 some thousand or 500,000 pounds of freight, you know, plus now we're going to fill up the wings with 250,000 pounds of weight. The thing might not have been able to take it and just crumbled apart as she ran down the runway.
The long trail of fire that goes out, it seems like forever. It looks like it's almost a mile off the end of the runway, and it's just really, really difficult to see that image because that airplane had so much momentum when it went off the end of the runway. But what we know at this point is for sure is that left engine was on fire. It was an uncontrolled flame out of that left engine that expanded to the left wing. It would kill almost all of the lift on that left wing. You have full power on the middle engine and the right engine, but not enough for them to continue to get airborne at the very, very high gross weight that they are on a trip all the way to Hawaii. They limp a little bit into the air, then they lose lift and they wallow back down to the earth. They hit that first building, the airplane rolls over on its left side in a knife edge. All that momentum continues to take it on for quite some distance, almost a mile. And what we know at this point is all 3 pilots have been reported dead by the major news agencies, and 11 people at least at this point have been taken to the hospital, and more, I'm assuming more, there's lots of missing people that they haven't identified yet. So when day breaks, I'm sure we're going to get updates. As we get updates on this and more information, I will certainly come to you with any sort of update, but that's what we know right now that happened just this evening in Louisville, Kentucky. Folks, hang in there. I know it's a tragedy. It's hard to watch these videos, but I'll keep you updated as I can. I'm Captain Steve. Talk to you soon.
All right, what are we going to see on the report, the final report? Probably mechanical human error. Being that the plane wasn't properly maintained, caused the plane to lose an engine, and human failure because tower control tower didn't tell them to abort the takeoff. And here's the problem, United States of America. If you ain't smart enough to figure out that you need double the space in a runway, and what do I mean by that is if you have a 500-foot runway, then you need 500 more feet for shutdown to abort a takeoff. And we're not seeing that. You humans have become very stupid. So that's how you're going to have to do your new airports that you're talking about building. If you got a 500-foot, 800-foot, 1,000-foot runway, you need 1,000-foot after that. And that's for aborting flight. In case something happens, they don't have to take off. And if I was pilot, I would have never took off. I would have shut her down and said, we're crashing, boys, but we ain't doing it 180 feet in the air and coming down. I would have ran it off of the end of the runway. I would have reversed turbines, braked. I would have done all kinds of stuff, but I wouldn't have took off. And I'll tell you what, these pilots knew it was over with before they even left the ground. As soon as they left the ground, then it started, they knew it was over with. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that I've had enough of that today. We'll be looking for some more footage out there. And like I said, you're going to have to change. And these airports, these airports are going to have to buy up the property around the airport. You're not going to be able to build around the airport. There shouldn't be any airports around any civilization, what I think. Around neighborhoods and all that. I don't think there should be. And if there is, well, it's got to be designed. You might have to put another 1,000 feet of runway on your runways if you're building a new airport. Think. All you people do is think about money and your profits. Now you're probably going to get sued. UPS is probably going to be shutting down soon. The lawsuits will come in. There's evidence right there that they had plenty of time to shut down as they're rolling down. You can't shut down it. You're running 150 miles an hour down the highway. I would have shut it down and aborted and done my best to try and stop the plane from taking off. To save my own life. Screw your cargo and your protocol and your flight control book. I'll rip the cover off of that and throw it out the window. Yeah. It's not going to be, I imagine once day breaks here and they get cameras in there, it's not going to be a pretty sight in that area. But you no longer are, they're no longer equipped. You know, and I know what this is all going to be. Well, we didn't have enough flight control with all this stuff that Trump's doing and everything. Yeah, this is just a mess. We're starting to see that we're operating a lot better in certain areas without government there. So I don't know. You go figure. You know, go figure. Now, you folks have a great day. We got some clouds in there. I got some things to do today. And I'll be back later. God bless everyone. All glory to God. And, you know, certain things don't have to happen, but people make bad calls. And I think it was a bad call to even continue to try and take off. You know, with that, did they even know they had a motor down or on fire? I don't know. You only had 3 people on the UPS plane. So I don't know if one of the flight control pilots or whatever, you know, was able to look outside a window and see, hey, we got no motor and we're on fire. Shut it down. I don't know. But that's the only way around this problem, President Trump and the USA of America and other countries, is if you got a 500-foot, 1,000-foot runway, a mile long, well, you need another mile at the end of it so they can abort. It's common sense. But these humans don't. Money. They want to take that money, pocket it. All right, folks. You folks have a great day. God bless. We're getting out of this whole racket. We just figured out the housing projects under investigation for RICO acts, conspiracy crimes, theft, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it's crazy. All right, folks. Have a great day. God bless. I'll be back.